Hello, welcome to another edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace. In a career spanning some 45 years, Dr. Ben Sidran has been no stranger to the world of rock, R&B, blues, and soul, as well as a noted academician, as well as journalist. If you recall, Dr. Sidran produced and hosted a program on NPR called Sidran on Record, which lasted for 5 years. In addition to him hosting and also performing on the show New Visions, which was on VH1, which won an ACE Award. He's produced legendary acts ranging from Mose Allison to Diana Ross. In addition to that, he's recorded 35 recordings, including his brand new CD, Don't Cry for No Hipster. He also took 10 years to write this very, very important book called There Was a Fire, Jews, Music, and the American Dream, which chronicles the Jews from Europe, how they came to the United States at the turn of the century and kind of transformed the entertainment industry via Broadway, vaudeville, the recording industry, as well as Tin Pan Alley. We sat down and we talked about this book. We talked about the brand new recording. And we also talked about why he decided and why it was very important for him to document all of this rich history in this new book. So sit back, relax, and enjoy Dr. Ben Sidran and his Hipster band live at the Jazz Standard here in New York City. Dr. Sidran, thank you again for taking the time to break bread with me. I want to congratulate you on many fronts. One, your brand new book, as well as your brand new CD, Don't Cry No Hipster, which is your 35th recording. First, before we go into the recording, I want to talk about the book because, first of all, I understand it took you 10 years to really put this together. And then I want to know about the exhaustive research that went into studying Jewish history and how they became a part of American culture as far as the entertainment industry.
Well, you know, I spent my whole life in jazz. And when I was 13 years old, you know, I had my bar mitzvah like all the Jewish boys. And I memorized this long passage that I read in Hebrew. I didn't know what I was saying, like all Jewish boys. You go on, and then, you know, they ask you to make a speech about how meaningful it is. And at the same time, I was listening to Horace Silver and Miles, and I was a 13-year-old kid, but I had some records. And that was meaningful. So the connection between the music that was really meaningful for me and the religious thing, which I didn't understand at all, just sent me into the Church of Bebop. And that's where I spent 45 years, 50 years, man, just devoted. And to this day, I believe that when you play this music, that's a form of prayer. That's what prayer is, you know. So I found a spiritual connection there. But when my son was like 6 years old, I wanted him to have some sense of a Jewish background, you know. So I got involved in a little group of people in a little small town where I live, and we started doing the music for the high holidays. The thing about the thing about Jews in general, if I digress too much, just hit me on the head, man. But, you know, it's possible to be a good Jew and not believe in God. You know, it's a social, it's really about social justice from my point of view, you know, do unto others, and from there on. So I got into doing the music at these little ceremonies, and then when I got into the music, the next thing that happened is I started remembering these melodies, and I recorded them with all the cats. I made this record called Life's a Lesson with Josh Redman and Lee Konitz, and oh my gosh, all these cats. Randy Brecker was on it. Then I started, I taught at the university, of course, that I made up. It was called Irving Berlin to the Beastie Boys, right? Jews in American population. And the more I read about it, the more I thought about it, I thought, well, there's something's going on here. Because, you know, the Jews, a very small percentage of the United States, like 2%, 3%, but their footprint in the popular, not just popular music, but the popular arts, films, books, dance, is very large, out of proportion to their numbers. And I was thinking, well, why is that? So that's what took 10 years, man, to read all about monotheism in all its forms, to read all about the history of where Jewish liturgical music came from, and it always came from the surrounding environment, to read all about, you know, the 19th century, and the relationship of Jews and blacks, man, is the most important relationship, I think, in American popular culture. That's where popular culture came from, that bond. And, you know, I had written about the sociology of black music before anyway, so...
Black Talk.
Black Talk. I was interested. So that's what took the 10 years, man, to read all that and try to get my head wrapped around this thing.
You know, Dr. Sidran, what I find interesting about this book was how part of Jewish culture was really the crux in the beginning of vaudeville, the beginning of sheet music publishing, even as we move to the modern time as far as the record industry and how everything has evolved. It's been like an imprint from, I guess, Russia, some of these elements that have really shaped the vernacular of American entertainment.
That's correct, yeah. It came out of the Yiddish theater. This idea, you know, before vaudeville, you go back before vaudeville, you got minstrelsy, and that's the Irish formulation in the 1830s. But when you come forward around the turn of the century, you've got everybody doing minstrelsy. You've got Jews, Irish, blacks, everybody. It's the first form of American musical theater. But the Yiddish theater that came from Russia was a little more broad, because originally in the Yiddish theater, man, if you had a joke you wanted to tell or a song you wanted to sing, well, they just throw you in the playbill. So it was a lot like vaudeville. And, you know, from vaudeville to musical theater was a jump, but it was not a stretch, you know. And this whole arc of the creation of American popular musical theater it's given rise to all the Broadway musicals, but it's also given rise to what they call the Great American Songbook, which if you go back and you listen to, you know, all your favorite old records, whether it's Ella Fitzgerald or, you know, Miles or Bird or whatever, a lot of the songs that people are playing are either part of the American Songbook, literally, or based on a song from the Great American Songbook. So this music that we're talking about is very much a part of the popular culture, but also the jazz culture, the art culture in the United States. began. Man created God so he would not be alone, lost without hope. And God became that hope for man, and the hope became the reason to believe that God created man as part of a plan, that there was a reason behind all this trouble in mind. Now millions believe with their hearts if they hold out their hands. God will appear, so they will not be alone, lost without hope, only to find they were never alone, only lost in the family of man. That was the plan.
Elaborate on one of the first major Jewish jazz icons in American culture, because like you said, there has been, I mean, jazz came and originated from Africa by way of the New Americas, but like you said, there was in your book you do write heavily about how the connection between Jews and African Americans, especially at the turn of the century, were kind of like one-on-one.
Well, you know, this is interesting, and people stay away from it because, you know, there's so many nuances, they don't want to say the wrong thing. But the literal fact is that around the turn of the century, they had already, there was a code word called ragtime. I say it's a code word because originally ragtime was a style of playing piano, came out of Sedalia, Missouri. Why did it come out of Sedalia, Missouri? Because it was a wide open crime town, and they had a lot of bordellos and a lot of cats playing solo piano. And they were playing, I mean, you could say Jelly Roll Morton played ragtime, but you'd also have to say that the ragtime was even part of James P. Johnson's approach. You know, the ragtime existed in Harlem and all these places simultaneously. Clearly a black form, and rag was a verb. It's what you did to a song to make it swing. But it was like this current expression to ragtime, ragtime, Cowboy Joe, ragtime. So Irving Berlin, who was fresh out of Russia, he was a young man. He was 19 years old. Now, he didn't come to this country until he was like 3 or 4. His first language was Yiddish. By the time he was 19 years old, he wrote Alexander's Ragtime Band. Now, he couldn't play any ragtime piano. He didn't know what ragtime was, but he knew that that word represented modern American street culture. And so he was just gifted. He couldn't read music, he couldn't write music, but he could hear music. And of course, he became one of our great songwriters. He also wrote God Bless America. He wrote White Christmas, Easter Parade, and all that stuff. So from the beginning, when the Jews, particularly from the Pale Settlement, Russia, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, came to this country, man, they couldn't get a job. They weren't white, you know that. They were not considered white, just like the Irish when they came weren't considered. I mean, white was Anglo-Saxon Protestant people. So they were hanging, man, and working down in the Lower East Side and coming up with this music that really was driven by a combination of Yiddish street slang and African-American street slang. That's the rhythm of that music initially, came from those voices and those people and those sentiments. And you can see that carry on all the way through. One of my favorite stories is the story about Louis Armstrong, who the myth is that Louis Armstrong was just a poor, lonely boy. I mean, the truth is, yes, his mother was a sex worker and his father was missing, but, he had a very rich life, and part of that life was working with the Karnofsky family on their junk wagon and going home at night with them for dinner and hearing all that Russian music. And so from the very beginning, jazz in America has been an American music. I mean, it's such an American form. It didn't start anywhere else. Built primarily on the black experience, because that's the rhythmic impulse and the vocal sound of the music. But harmonically, all those beautiful harmonics came from the American popular songbook, which was Jewish. And even as Louis Armstrong, he once said, he was talking about how he was noted as being the first scat singer, and what was that about? Well, he said, man, we used to do that when we were kids. It was sort of like imitating the Jews when they were rocking. He meant davening, praying. So the rhythm of that, the rhythm of Yiddish, the rhythm of Hebrew, the rhythm of African-American culture, the rhythm of the streets of New York and Los Angeles, the people, the modern sense of what America was all coming to ferment right around the turn of the century, and from there it's just blossomed. But that essence has been with us throughout the entire century.
And something, too, that you have to also add into consideration, too, you said something about earlier, and you did bring this up in your book, Jews were not looked upon as white. And you bring this out vividly in your book, because of the social norms for African Americans, we were kind of stuck to the low end of the totem pole as far as economics, education, and because jazz was considered the low end, because there were elite people in the turn of the century just looked upon and shunned jazz music.
Oh, yeah.
People kind of had, as an outlet, as you explain in your book, gravitated to the new music.
Right. And, the idea that the music could say things that people couldn't say, it could do things that people couldn't do. The music would bring everybody together. Yes, the Cotton Club was segregated. But from a musician's point of view, you'll have Harold Arlen on stage playing piano, and you'll have Duke Ellington's orchestra. I mean, you have this mix of musical cultures, and the musicians have always played together. The idea that the American popular music got integrated before Benny Goodman hired, Teddy Wilson or Lionel Hampton. It really got integrated in the recording studios. Once the recording was going on, and there was no club owner worried about what the audience would say if there was an integrated band. Cats have been playing together, black, white, green, red, from the beginning. And I mean, musicians are about music, and so that's been a condition of American popular music from the start. The one thing that I have to say, the combination of African Americans who really are as American as you can get. There's nobody more American than an African American, right? Because those people were here at the beginning, here through the middle, going to be here in the future. The Jews learned how to be American, but at the same time, the African Americans got this very rich narrative from the Jews, because African Americans came here. They came from an oral tradition. There was no written tradition from where they came from. So they lost their history. They lost a lot of the language, a lot of the culture. They tried to keep it alive in the drums and in the music circles. But eventually, after a few generations, they were truly strangers in a strange land. And when the Jews arrived, these were the people of the book. These were the people of the great narrative of slavery in Egypt. These were the people of the great imagery of justice, social justice winning out. And so that gave a nice framework for the black experience in America. There was a moment when the American dream was put together by these forces. And later on, it kind of radiated out to the rest of America. But you look at American popular culture, it's still resting on those branches.
No, don't cry for no hipster. He knew what he signed up for. Look in the field, that run-down appeal. The passing ship, the distant shore. Nah, don't cry for no hipster. He saw the writing, he saw the writing on the wall. And it gives him hope. Just another slippery slope. It's a deeper truth he can't recall. And when young becomes old, cool turns to cold. Yeah, that's when we'll see if the truth set him free. Till then, don't cry for no hipster. He had his day, he had his night. Let's call it what it is. But in a life like this, it's usually wrongs that make it right.
Let's talk about this record. Don't Cry for No Hipster. This is your 35th recording, and I've followed you for many, many years, both on the journalist side as well as on the music side. This record, one, it's a little funky. It's a little traditional. There's a blues element to it, but there's also a wit and cynicism of Mr. Sidran. What's going on this album?
Well, you know what? It's very interesting because I took those 8 or 9 years out to write that book. And during the process, I made a couple records. You know, I mean, you just do it. But when that book was finished, something happened, man. It's like my mind was free because I think I had for 8 or 9 years been holding all this information in my head and trying to move it around and trying to, you know, I'd wake up every night, man, I write stuff down and you know, during the day, go sort it out. A lot of pressure. And then when that was done, I wrote all those tunes that are on Don't Cry for No Hipster within a matter of a month and a half. They just came out. It was just fun. I was just throwing them away, man. You know, how's that new job working out for you? You know, just his attitude. No love songs. You know, no, gee, I wish you were back here, baby. None of that, man. It was just right off the top of my head. The kind of things that I was thinking about. Simple grooves, almost like a '60s R&B record. Very simple, underplayed. Everything understated, the solos underplayed on purpose, man. You know, there are cats out there that can play 1,000,000 notes in a minute, man. We're going the other way. We're going to just underplay it. We're going to use space. We're going to create this atmosphere where, you know, the wind is blown through the pines, you know, and then we're going to talk about some stuff. And it was just fun, and it worked. And, you know, everybody I know who has heard the record, friends of mine from the past, all say the same thing. They all came up to me and said, man, did you get a diagnosis or something, man? Because, you know, it's got that kind of end-of-the-road vibe to it. And we're just quite the opposite, man. I feel great.
Sometimes, you kind of, they say art imitates life, but your life is really your work. I mean, you're very passionate about jazz. You're very passionate about the education side of this. I want to know how you got to this level in this space of your life right now.
You know what, man? I've thought about that. I really have. I mean, I was fortunate to come up in the 60s where there was both great jazz, great bebop, Cannonball, Adderley, Train. I mean, there was great music, Wynton Kelly, Bud Powell, people to listen to and to emulate. And there was great radical historians, man. I had a teacher at the university who said to me one day, Ben, this is what history feels like right here. You and me sitting here talking, this is what history feels like. This is what it felt like on the barricades in France. It never felt any different. It's never going to feel any different. And wham, I realized that there's no such thing as life and art or whatever, man. There's just this, and that our ability to change ourselves, to grow, to educate, and to become the person we want to become, to make ourselves who we want to, is infinite, man. And I got right on that. But it took a long time to figure out what it was. But all I can say is, as I get older, I'm trying harder and harder. There's an old expression. I want to live the life I sing about. I've always dug certain songs and sung about certain attitudes. I want to live that if I can. That to me is, that's the only thing that's in my power, man. Economic success is out of my power. My health, it's out of my power. God knows this country is out of my power. It's the only thing that's in my power. Like if you believe that what you should be doing is X, Y, and Z, and don't just talk about it, then do X, Y, and Z, see what happens. What's the worst that's going to happen, man? So I've been kind of going with that for quite some time. And I believe, too, that there are people out here, man, who are very sincere, who are very smart, and I consider them what I call first-degree searchers, man. They're out here searching. Whatever they could be shoemakers. It doesn't have to be an intellector in the arts, right? But they recognize each other when they meet, and they're obligated to just sort of give a tip as they pass. It's a romantic image I have of being on planet Earth. But I do believe it, man, and I believe it's what separates us from the animals, man. I think that human beings are here. We're part of a very long revolution. Not an American, a Russian, French. The revolution started 10,000 years ago back in the caves, man. And it's toward social justice, and it's toward freedom, and it's toward enlightenment. And along the way, we found music. Music has powered this trip to the point where today we rely, those of us who are trying to hew to this path, we rely on the music to tell us where we're at. There's a truth in music. Now I like a lot of cheap music too, man. I'm not saying I'm listening to Debussy and Coltrane all. Not at all, man. I love everything, man. This will date me, but I love Prince and I like Eminem and I like, there's some stuff I don't like, but generally, man, music makes me feel good. And so I stick to the music. I stick to the musicians. When I'm sitting there, man, listening to this stuff, I get an idea, I write it down. I follow up on it. I wake up the next day, do the same thing, do it, and you'd be surprised if you do that every day for 10, 20, 30 years, you can make some progress.
That'll do it again for another edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace. I'd like to personally thank the legendary Dr. Ben Sidran for his time, as well as the staff and management at the Jazz Standard. As always, please visit my website, www.thepacereport.com, for my weekly column as well as my past segments. Until next time, remember, if it's in the groove, it'll make you move. Till next time, peace.
So how's that new style working out for you now? I understand even the president wants to use your tailor too. Of course, not the average man. He don't have a clue. He don't know that going barefoot is like wearing the latest shoe. But with a style like that, what could possibly go wrong? Brand new music,